Thank you very much to ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vadym Zheltovskyy, and I have the pleasure to be in this Thessaloniki University in terms of Erasmus program. This week I represent the University of Warsaw, Faculty of Political Science and International Relations. This is a very big faculty. We have 15 departments and more than 3,000 students and approximately 200 lecturers and professors. So more particularly, I represent the Department of European Institutions and European Law. This is a small department. We have 8 people, and we cooperate in terms of our research idea objectives, which is actually from the title, Department of European Union, Institutions and Law, and we try to research the way European institutions function, the administration in European Union, the relationship between the European Union and member states. And what I do, for example, in particular, is also to try to analyze the models of relations and cooperation between the European Union and Eastern Partnership. Eastern Partnership is an initiative that was actually established by Poland and Sweden in 2029, and it covers 6 states which are not member states of European Union, but which declared a vision of closer cooperation. This is Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus. From what we see now, only 3 of these countries declare active cooperation, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, and we have association agreements signed with these countries, while Belarus, Azerbaijan, and Armenia are not so active in the cooperation. So that's also what we are doing. Apart from that, we are starting different groups in European Union, such as Visegrad Group, and I'm sure you heard about that. So Visegrad Group, it was called before Visegrad Triangle, after the dissolution of Czechoslovakia. Now it's 4 countries comprising this group: Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary. And I will come back to this today because it's important to show how which role Poland plays in this group, and what is the impact of this group on the European arena. But more specifically, according to the specifics of your course, of your class, and the specifics of today's situation in Polish EU realities, I would like us to reflect and to discuss the issue of Polish governance in context of EU-Ukraine relations, Polish relations. And therefore, I entitled my talk today as Governance and Public Administration in Poland, Transformation Reforms and Case of EU-Polish Relations. To be more specific, I sent the presentation, so you probably had a chance to look at it, but just let me say a few words what I would like us to think about today. And again, I will be talking, but you are more than welcome to interrupt me, ask me some questions. Do not postpone it till last moment. I myself will also ask some absolutely voluntarily questions, so again, no pressure and no stress. If you feel like answering, feel free. Because, as you saw in the presentation, I created a number of word clouds, and I'm a big fan of word cloud, where I put some words from documents, and I ask my students to help me with the, decoding the meaning of this word and why I decided to put it there. So more specifically, as for the outline of our meeting today, I would like us to discuss first of all and define key terminology. Because when we talk about EU-Polish relations, we often hear a few words and few terms on the media that appear very often, and that's why I decided that it would be a good idea to start with short definition of such key notions as what is liberal democracy, or what does it mean in liberal democracy, de-democratization, and why this term is referred to Poland lately. What is Article 7 about Treaty of European Union, Article 2, and decentralization. Why I put there decentralization? You will probably guess when I talk about reforms after 1989, because decentralization is one of the reforms that Poland has been associated with as a success story. So, but just in a second, I will go into detail. After that, I would like to provide you with a brief overview of public administration reforms in Poland and the way Polish political scene looks now, what happened after the last elections, what is the status quo in Polish parliament and on Polish political scene. And probably what is the most interesting for you, I decided to concentrate on key studies and case studies of key developments, which is rule of law dispute between Polish government and European Commission, and as you noticed, 2021 migration crisis on Polish-Belarus border. So before we go into that, if I may ask you just a very general question to help me to build my talk. If you hear Poland, what name, what event, what kind of situation you associate now Poland with? You mentioned Polish-Belarus border migration crisis because it's on TV now, but maybe some names you heard, maybe some events, and anything that comes to your head when you hear Poland. Yeah. Or maybe you have not, you have never heard about it, and that's also fine because it's 2,000 kilometers almost from Thessaloniki to Warsaw, and usually and media works in that way that we are concentrating on things which are very close. For example, 2 weeks ago I was in Spain giving talk about Visegrad Group migration policies, and I gave example of case study of migration crisis. People knew very little about Poland, but they knew a lot about Spanish-Morocco conflict, which happened a few months ago, and it was very close to them. So I conducted experiment. I came back to Poland and asked my students, okay, people, we are talking about Polish-Belarus migration conflict. What have you heard about Morocco-Spanish conflict? Nobody heard nothing. So that shows that we are actually into events that are around us. So the same thing if I ask about Turkish-Greece issue with migration by Polish students, I'm sure there will be no many answers for that. So that was just encouragement for you to speak. And now my question is, what do you associate with Poland? What have you heard about Poland? Who is the president? Who is prime minister? I don't know. Do we have bicameral parliament, one-cameral parliament? Anything you heard, please. Yeah, please.
About political system, I've heard so far about, for example, the EIS, if I pronounce it right, the government party, and about Instytucji, I cannot pronounce right the name of the prime minister. Morawiecki, sorry. Yeah, and generally something about Poland that you may know. It is, for example, reading books, we may find that Poland has always problems with its neighbors. All the neighbors have problems with Poland.
Let me stop you here, because this is important. So, what kind of, if you are talking about historical perspective or current perspective?
Historical.
Historical, okay, because that's also interesting. All right, so we have ruling party Law and Justice, which is PiS in Polish. That is true. I will talk about that. Thank you. What about let's compare Greece and Poland. So, do you know when Poland entered the European Union? Plus minus. Do you know when Greece entered the European Union? It was in 1981, yeah, so a long time ago. And Poland joined European Union much later. I see in your eyes the answer. No? No? Sorry? Must what?
Much later upgrade.
Upgrade.
Much later upgrade.
Much, yeah, exactly. Much later, yes.
2007.
You are very close, but before. In 2007, we had Romania and Bulgaria entering the European Union. Penultimate enlargement, because after that there was only Croatia in 2013. But Poland entered and joined European Union in 2004. So this is also very important to mention at the beginning of my talk, to set the scene of political, socio-economic aspects that impact the relationship between Polish government and EU institutions. So, good ladies and gentlemen, in 2004 there was so-called Big Bang enlargement, 10 new member states, and Poland was one of the biggest member states who entered the European Union. Poland, who had more than 40, who has more than now 38, 40 million, according to different data, million of people. So a big Central European state that entered European Union in 2004. What is another important aspect when we talk about Poland and EU is that Poland was #1 beneficiary of a cohesion policy. Cohesion policy is 7-year program policy of European Union addressed at changes in infrastructure and in order to improve socio-economic situation, investing in social capital, etc. Excuse me, you wanted to ask something? No? So there was, Poland was #1 recipient and beneficiary of EU funds, and this is very visible because if you compare Poland after 2004 and now in 2021, you could see a lot of changes in infrastructure and social initiatives financed by the European Union and from EU funds, and this is quite visible. Therefore, one might not be surprised that when you ask a Polish citizen whether you are optimistic about being in the European Union or not, more than, maybe you could guess, how many, because in Greece, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 50-50. When we ask about optimistic attitude to European Union and favorable attitude. At least I read some data that 50-50 percentage, correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, let's say that it's a slightly higher for pro in Britain, it's a smaller percentage against the English.
Right, so but it's not like it's not 50-50, but again, it's not very big gap. Yeah, let's say 60-40. Yes, something like that. But in Poland, it's more than 80%. So who are in favor of EU membership and who are in favor of being a member of EU. This is also very important to remember when we try to understand the politics of government in Poland and when we try to understand the nature of EU-Polish relations. So let us go to this conceptualization of key notions when we come to Poland, to Polish governance and public administration in Poland and European Union. So I put on the top decentralization reform. I put it also here liberal, illiberal democracy, rule of law, and 2 articles from Treaty of European Union, Article 7 and Article 2. Let me start with decentralization, because this is a reform that has started after 1989, after the fall of communism in Poland, and as decentralization is associated with Polish transformation. I myself originally come from Ukraine. So I came from Ukraine to Poland. I have lived in Poland for, let me count, 13 years. And now I may talk also as a Polish citizen about Polish relations with the EU, but also about Polish experience of decentralization reform and its impact for non-EU members such as Ukraine. So in 2015, I had a chance to coordinate a project about Polish experience of decentralization reform and achievements in decentralization for Ukraine. So we organized a group of experts and we went to Ukraine, to different groups, to different regions of Ukraine, and we organized courses for policymakers, non-governmental organizations, and civil society actors of, in general, how Polish experience of decentralization reform may be implemented. So what is special about Polish decentralization and why it is called a success story? Number one interesting thing is that it was reformed from above. So it didn't come from grassroots movements, but it was the decision of governments to decentralize it, which is quite unique because usually governments tend to centralize power, not decentralize power. And as a result, the most important municipality unit in Poland is, well, in English is commune or municipality. In Poland, we have more than 2,000, to be precise, 2,470, I'm afraid to be mistaken, 9 units, municipal units that are independent and responsible for self-governance on the area. So this is very important to state that Poland is a decentralized country that gives actually opportunities and chances for the municipalities to be responsible for what is going on in the area. At the same time, we are talking about 3 levels of governance in Poland. We are talking about central government, and unlike in Greece, president is elected by general elections. So this is also important to mention because in Poland we have general election of president, and the last elections happened 2 years ago in 2019. We have bicameral parliament. What does it mean? It means that we have the lower chamber and upper chamber. In lower chamber, we have 460 members of parliament. In upper chamber, we have 100 senators. So we have Sejm, which is lower chamber, and Senate, which is upper chamber of parliament. And in such a case, we have bicameral parliament in Poland. When it comes to way of election of members of parliament, this is a proportionate system for lower parliament, for Sejm, and this is majoritarian system for Senate. When it comes to the last elections, you mentioned the name of Polish party, ruling party, PiS, which is full name is Law and Justice. In Polish is Prawo I Sprawiedliwość, which means peace. And the party won elections in 2019 and again had a chance to form the government. But at the same time, when we look at current situation, in the last elections, situation was not as obvious for ruling party because it lost the second chamber. It lost Senate very narrowly. And now we have the majority of ruling party in the Sejm or lower chamber, and we have the slight majority of opposition in the Senate, 51 to 49, which is a balance of powers. At the same time, when it comes to presidential election, it was again very narrow political competition, and the presidential candidate from PiS, from ruling party, won very narrowly with the opposition candidate. So what we have now in Poland, we have ruling party with the prime minister, we have majority in lower chamber, and we have president who also comes from ruling party, but with minor majority of opposition in the Senate. That's how situation looks like when it comes to central government now in Poland. When we talk about central government, I should also mention that the prime minister is usually comes from the party who wins elections, so no surprise here. Probably in Greece it's very much the same. And there must be support of parliament before president actually appoints prime minister. So that's quite traditional procedure. What did I forget about central government? I believe nothing. So now maybe only a few words about direction of and the profile of key parties on political scene of Poland. So a ruling party, Law and Justice, could be defined as conservative one, National Conservative Party, while the bigger opposition party, Civic Platform, could be defined as the centrist, liberal centrist party. And this has been the major battle, political battle between these two parties. I don't know if you heard such politician as Donald Tusk. Donald Tusk. So he was a 5-year president of European Council. Yeah.
And now president of the EPP group.
Absolutely correct. So after he finished his position as European Council president, and if you remember, it's only maximum 2 terms, 2.5 years twice. There is no chance according to Treaty of Lisbon to prolong this position. So Tusk remained the head of, became the head of EPP, European People Party, but he's not in the European Parliament. He's just the head, the president of the party. And also, it was a big comeback because nobody thought he was serious about coming to Polish political scene. But this year, he announced officially that he's coming back to Polish politics in order to win the next elections. So now he's also active in Polish political scene. He's the leader of opposition party, which is called Civic Platform. And again, that's a big competition, political competition between ruling party, Civic Platform, and we also have new actors. Tell me if you have the same in Greece, because for few elections now, every election we have a new political party. But who is the leader of this new political party that usually takes up to 10% of votes? So a few years ago, it was the rock musician who decided to create anti-systemic party, quite populist one, and came to parliament getting around 10% of votes. He actually also took the 3rd place in presidential election in 2015. This time, a party that now he has only few percentage, and according to poll taking, he's not likely to get into next parliament. When we come to discussion about new actors, this is another party of and quite popular now, about led by. Let me try to find English word for this profession: TV host or celebrity. So he had his own TV show, and he decided to create a party which is quite close to Civic Platform, and they may go together and they may create an alliance in order to win the upcoming elections. So we have quite traditional political scene in Poland. When it comes to, so this is central level. When it comes to lower levels, we have also level of so-called voivodeship, because voivodeship is the regions. So country is divided into 16 regions, and this is the middle level of governance, voivodeship level of governance. Here we have quite interesting situation because we could witness a duality. On the one hand, we have voivode, the position as a governor, the position that is appointed by central government. So this is an official who is appointed by central government and is responsible for implementation of government initiatives on the level of voivodeship. At the same time, starting with central level, middle level, we have also self-governance position of marshal. So that's the self-governance position of local self-government at this level, which is quite fluent in potential and tasks. And we come to a lower level of local self-governance. We have districts and municipalities. At this level, we are talking only about decentralized government, and local self-governance in general is operating on this level. Now, there is a debate and discussion about changing to decentralization patterns in Poland, but let me not go into detail. Let me just say that local self-governance in Poland now protest against recent changes offered by central government because they argue that there are tendencies of taking the competencies and taking the rights from lower level, grassroots level, and that should be stopped. So we have this constant competition for the number of tasks and responsibilities. So decentralization, Poland as decentralized state. And now let me before I go to European Union and Poland, let me also ask you to help me or define myself the idea of liberal democracy and illiberal democracy. So why do we talk about illiberal democracy in context of Poland? You know, when I check, even yesterday, just when I checked the Freedom House reports, Poland is a democratic state, is a free state, according to the report. So my question is, why do media, and why it is quite often met in the media and the analysis, the connection Poland and illiberal democracy. So what is illiberal democracy, guys? How do you define it? Liberal democracy equals, for me, to constitutional democracy. Yeah, we have fair elections, but not only elections. We have independent institutions. We have equal rights of every participant of our society, political and social life. But what is illiberal democracy for you? Have you ever heard about such term, notion? Yeah, volunteers, no pressure. Please.
For me personally, in general, democracy is more like a somehow democracy. It looks like a democracy. It has elections, it has democratic procedures, but it's not in the base, in the substance liberal. In terms of having the same time in TV, for example, for the government, the party, the other parties. Things like that, for example.
You're absolutely right. So illiberal democracy is a officially democratic state with elements of non-democratic practices that are coming into the practice. And the politician that is, well, infamously associated with illiberal democracy in European Union is Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban, or Prime Minister of Hungary, because In 2014, he pronounced his famous or ill-famous or infamous manifesto of illiberal democracy, where he said that European Union should look like at countries which are technically not democratic but doing well, and he gave example of Russia, China, Turkey, etc., etc. And when we analyze his actions in Hungary, Hungary which has free and fair elections, but when it comes to treatment of other players and actors, we have this, the control over media outlets, or we have control over courts, independent judges. And here comes the element of illiberal democracy, which for me could be some sort of oxymoron, because democracy either illiberal or not democracy. And it reminds me that, to finish my point about Hungary, it reminds me of a talk by Professor Ashton Ash I forgot now the name. Professor Ash, I want to say, or Ashton. See, sometimes it's stressed. Okay, never mind. Let's go on. So anyway, there was a professor from Oxford University who gave a talk entitled that "Is a dictatorship can dictatorship be a member of European Union?" So this was in reference to Orban's way of governance. When it comes to Poland, why illiberal democracy tendencies are observed and are associated with Poland? Let me give you an example of some reports that appeared last week or 2 weeks ago. And in this regard, I mean IDEA International Report on State of Democracy, Global State of Democracy. So the authors of this report noticed that the changes in democratic practices in Poland go into the direction of illiberal democracy. And unfortunately, according to this report, I'm just quoting here, the changes that took place in Poland for the last 5 years, usually it takes countries 9 years to have these changes into illiberal changes, and in Poland it happened in 5 years' time. So that is why very often this association appears. Illiberal democracy, but why? We will know why when we pay attention to case study of rule of law and rule of law controversy dispute between European Union and Poland. So before we go into that, let me also say a few words about Article 7 and Article 2. Treaty of European Union, yeah? Treaty of Lisbon, which entered into force, which was ratified in 2009. I believe today we have 9th of December, if my memory services me right. Treaty of Lisbon entered into force in the 1st December of 2009, but was signed into 13 December 2007. You know, so that's pretty much, we are now close from this anniversary of Treaty of Lisbon. And Treaty of Lisbon introduces Article 7. It is also called nuclear procedure, Article 7, against member state. So if you ever heard about Article 7, you are very welcome to tell me. If not, I am very happy to share with you what it is. Article 7 is an article of Treaty of Lisbon that sets the rule, the condition when a member state may get sanctions for not practicing rule of law procedures in these member states. In simple words, if a member state decides to break rule of law principle, the European Commission or European Parliament or other member states may initiate Article 7 procedure and put sanctions to a particular member state. Never before in the history of European Union, Article 7 was started. Never before, with one exception, two exceptions. So probably because I'm talking about Poland, you could guess that European Commission initiated Article 7 against Poland. But do you know the name of another country that European Parliament initiated this procedure? I mentioned this country today. Yeah. Hungary, exactly. So if in case of Poland there was suspicion of breaking rule of law principle, and European Commission started the procedures. I will show you on other slides how it went and how many years it took before Article 7 was officially launched. In terms of Hungary, it was European Parliament which initiated, because there was enough arguments to initiate and launch such article, such procedure. Sometimes I'm asked by my students whether Article 7 is an effective mechanism. Well, the answer is no, because and then I have a logical question to my students. Why do you think Article 7 is not an effective mechanism? Everybody has some trouble with answering, and then I came up with possible explanation is that, well, when somebody enters European Union, this is a volunteer act. It's not done by force, it's a volunteer act. So the authors of Treaty of Lisbon probably didn't think that a member state that joins European Union voluntarily will decide to break the rules of the union that this member state joined. But that is why we do not have a clear package of sanctions, and at the same time we have symbolic matter of this article, because so-called embarrassment effect, because even only the procedure that this article is launched against a particular member state, all around the world, all media tell about that, and this has this embarrassing implication for particular government that, look, we break the law, probably. We don't, there are some suspicions. Article 2, that's about European values, because these articles are connected. And Article 2 is a very brief article in Treaty of Lisbon, which enlists European values that all of us know. This is the rule of law, equal treatment of every member of our society, regardless of faith or race or gender. And so these are two articles. De-democratization. I also, it's needless to mention that de-democratization is a process of, well, democracy decline, and now we could observe it around Europe, around the world, and in some European Union states as well. Again, I don't know if you were following, I believe last week it was, the conference on democracy of Joseph Biden. I believe it was last week because I was still in Poland. So Joseph Biden invited 110 states to talk about democracy. Poland was invited, but there was also a disclaimer that Poland should provide argumentation for changes of legal system that are not associated with democratic practice, and give arguments for these changes. But you know who was not invited for Biden, as its informal name of the conference, Biden's Conference on Democracy? Hungary. And this is really sad, because that's European Union we are talking about, and that's about ability to speak with one voice. But that's how it is. That's the latest developments. Well, coming back to Poland and the rule of law, case study number 1. I'm nervous to look at my watch. We have time like till 7:30, 7:45.
Yeah, we have 45 minutes at least.
Excuse me?
45 minutes, yeah.
Okay, that's it.
More than half an hour. So.
Yeah, yeah. As you mentioned, I already analyzed this slide without showing it to you because we talked about multi-level governance, we talked about central government and decentralization in Poland and public administration in Poland. So I mentioned that. Let me move on to case studies, the rule of law. Dispute between Polish government and European Commission. Well, it started a long time ago because time flies. And have you ever heard about dispute Article 7 against Poland in Greek media? Have you ever heard about European Commission Polish relations in terms of rule of law? Maybe now, when there is a debate as implication of this controversy, there is a debate for Poland to receive funds for recovery of in post-COVID. So Poland has not received, and according to European Commission official, is unlikely to receive the EU funds aimed at post-COVID recovery this year. So, which is, you know, a big reputation impact also because I don't know about Greece political approach to post-COVID reality and recovery funds, but in Poland, government created the whole program, which is called New Deal. I'm sorry, Polish Deal, because it's similar to Roosevelt New Deal in name, but. So the name is Polish Deal, and a lot of posters, a lot of promo campaigns around Poland. But in order to start the New Deal, the Polish Deal, we need funds. And the European Commission says, not funds yet. We need to analyze the documents. But the real matter, real thing is behind the dispute. So, yeah, have you ever heard about that? Polish. What happened in Poland that the European Commission decided to start Article 7? I will be surprised if you heard, so that's fine. Yeah, please.
Yeah, the government decided about some changes in the law system of Poland. I don't know if they are minor or major, but they are significant in any way. And I think the justice many changes.
You're absolutely right. Reason number 1, changes to legal system. Reason number 2, changes to appointment of justice, to court, tribunal court. Yes, exactly. And well, when you compare reports about state of democracy in Poland, so exactly it is legal system and system of justice that usually receives the lowest number of points. Because of recent changes. So again, we are not lawyers, and this is not my idea today to go into details of all the changes. But what I want you to show you is some triggers that started the process and why it happened and where we are now. So rule of law dispute. Well. Yeah, we have it on our slide. Time flies very fast. It started on 25th October 2015. So right after victory of the first victory of the Law and Justice Party, it became a winner. It took in 2015, it took the majority in two chambers of Polish Parliament. So it has a president coming from this party. So Law and Justice in 2015 had the majority in every sphere in terms of central government. and started the implementation of good change initiatives. Why did I underline the good change initiatives? So, good change was the key slogan of election campaign. It was addressed at people who were skeptically approaching the former ruling party civic platform, and the Law and Justice Party argument was that Poland was in ruin, that's I am also quoting, and Poland needs good change to come back, to get up from the knees. That's again the quote of election campaign of Law and Justice Party. Therefore, there was good change initiatives. One of the most famous one that is associated with ruling party was 500 plus. What does it mean 500 plus? Is financial assistance, financial help to everybody who has a small child, but only the second child. For example, if a family has 2 children, so for the second child, the third, and so on, this family receives 500 Polish zloty every month. So that's a lot of money every month. But that changed in 2019 election because Law and Justice Party said, hey, remember for 500 plus for second child, we will give it for the first child as well. And now every Polish family who has children receives 500 zloty. It's like almost 110 euros for every child every month. So if you have a child, even one, you have 100 euros every month. And that is why it is associated with the ruling party, one of the flagship reports, because, well, opposition was very critical, saying that it will lead to bankruptcy of Poland, it will lead to absolute collapse of economy. But now, opposition is in a very tricky situation, because, look, first opposition criticized the ruling party that why for the second child? Why not for the first? So the ruling party implemented also for the first child. And now, when opposition is asked, okay, you win the election, will you remain, will you keep the 500 plus? What do you think they say? They say, yes, of course. Because, you know, it's a political suicide to say that, no, we will take this 500 plus from you. So that shows how political views may change depending on socio-economic political situation. But this was a very important program that created hard electorate for ruling party. When it comes to other changes, well, it was change in composition and functioning of the Constitutional Tribunal. And only one example, as I promised, I will not take your time and go and exhaust you with some details. So it happened that before the election, it went in 2015, all the parliament elected 3 judges to Constitutional Tribunal. So 3 judges were elected and waited for official appointment by the president to Constitutional Tribunal. Election comes. Law and Justice Party wins and decides to elect 3 new judges. But these judges, well, people say, observers say, they are more loyal to this party. So what we have 3 judges elected before 2015 who were not appointed officially and who did not become officially the judges. But when the Law and Justice wins, Sejm or Polish Parliament elects 3 new judges, and these judges very quickly are nominated and occupy these positions in Constitutional Tribunal. They are called doublers, or those who just take the already taken place. And European Commission was not happy. Opposition was not happy. They said that you cannot do that. You already elected judges, let them work. Law and Justice said, sorry, it was the old, same old parliament. We have new parliament, we have new elections, everything is fine. And that started like this rock, the process of law and justice dispute. This is only one example, and let me give you some. I am not a fan of text, too much text on the slides, but I'm sorry for that. The next one has it. Because I want to show you step after step how this went. So in 2015-2016, there was no Article 7 yet, but before Article 7, European Union has the procedure of structured dialogue under rule of law framework. And there was the first recommendation, if you could let me quote, so the recommendation of European Commission to implement fully judgment of constitutional treaty, which requires that the 3 judges that were lawfully nominated by previous parliament, 7th term of the Sejm, can take up judicial functions in the Constitutional Tribunal. And that 3 judges nominated by new Sejm, new parliament, to already occupy posts without the valid legal basis do not take up their functions. So this was the position of EU. Just let these former people work. Well, I did not mention one more thing, because in politics, symbolism matters, that's what I mentioned, but in politics, very often personalities matter. And in case of Polish-European Union dispute, the personality of the head of constitutional treaty was also, tribunal was also important. So in 2016, there was new election of new head of constitutional tribunal, a person who got elected, who got the head, and who is a head now, is associated with the Law and Justice Party, and is described as loyal toward a Law and Justice Party. But the previous president, the previous head of constitutional tribunal was not associated with this party, and therefore this gentleman, professor of constitutional law, was not happy with these 3 judges who were elected on the place of which were already taken, and that is why he said that and ordered that this was not legal. But in order for the decision of constitutional tribunal to enter into force, according to Polish law, it must be published. And who publishes these decisions? Government. So you could see what a chaos happened in 2015-2016, because we have new government who does not want to publish the judgment of Constitutional Tribunal, because the head of Constitutional Tribunal was not loyal to them and was still old one. So, and even there was a campaign of where there was a campaign and protest called Beata Publicuj. Beata was the name of Prime Minister, Ms. Beata Szydło, and protesters demanded that she publishes the judgments of Constitutional Tribunal. The same we could read in European Commission recommendation. publish and implement fully judgments of constitutional tribunals and ensure that publication of future judgments is automatic, but not just a matter of delay. So it was year 2016, the first recommendation of European Union. Well, there was no change and there was no compromise at that time, and therefore next steps arrived quite fast. In the next 2 years, from 2016 to 2017, we are talking about evolution from rule of law opinion to the Polish government to Article 7. So if recommendations do not work, there is another step of second recommendation, third recommendation, and finally the launch of Article 7. 20th December, today we have 9th December, so 4 years ago, unbelievably how time flies, we had the official launch of Article 7 procedure by European Commission. What it might mean? It might mean that Poland may have sanctions, may face sanctions, or may even lose the vote, the right to vote in the council. At the same time, to do that, there must be unanimous support of all member states. But we know that there is another Article 7 procedure against Hungary, and the chance of this is very little. Therefore, we are talking about implications of this dispute now, when at stake is money for recovery fund after post-COVID situation. And it only remains to be seen which discussions and which decisions will be made, and whether Poland will receive this money or Poland will have to actually change legal system according to the recommendations of European Commission. So this is very briefly what has happened and what is happening. And what does it lead to? It leads to constant pressure in relations between the European Union and Poland. And this has a direct impact on my next case study, which is Polish-Belarus migration crisis and the position of European Union, position of Poland. So let me ask you now about migration crisis. I also forgot that this is actually very, sorry, so let's come back for a little moment before migration crisis. The most recent developments in EU-Polish bilateral relations. So when we look at the most recent developments, in October there was a ruling of Constitutional Tribunal of Poland, again, whose head is associated as a loyal judge toward Rule and Justice Party. And that was very loud judgment because, and absolutely unprecedented, because the Prime Minister of Poland asked Constitutional Tribunal to judge whether the Polish Constitution has primacy over EU law. And there was a ruling of the Constitutional Tribunal of Poland on the principle of primacy of EU laws, stating that Polish Constitution is has priority over EU law, which had an immediate reaction from European Union. And 2 weeks after that, there was a plenary debate with Polish Prime Minister and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. And well, if you look at this debate, there was a clear division of votes in the European Parliament. And when we compare political groups, supporters of Polish government position were represented. So primarily these were representatives of, well, Eurosceptical formation. when we compare who was arguing in favor of European Commission approach, well, primarily these were the Euro, let's call it, if I use this terminology, Eurosceptical, Euro-optimist representatives. There was a very strong resolution on 21st October of the European Parliament stating that every member state must respect the rule of law and the primacy of EU treaties. And this, like 3 dots, the story is not over. The story, the integration as a general European integration is a dynamic process, and it remains to be seen what developments it will have in the near future. But example of problems on line Brussels-Warsaw could be seen on the crisis which happened a few weeks ago on Polish-Belarus border. Because there was the idea of some politicians, for example, to invite Frontex to the border. Polish government said that we are cooperating with Frontex. Frontex is an EU agency responsible for developing the legal solutions for asylum seekers and for migration issue in general. But also it has officers who perform security functions on borders. So Polish government said that we are cooperating with Frontex, but we are handling the situation on the border, and we do not need Frontex officers. So opposition said, but what about symbolism? Because imagine if on Polish-Belarus border there are soldiers or officers from Greece, from Italy, from Spain, it sends a strong signal to Lukashenko and the Putin regime that EU speaks with one voice. So there was this debate. Plus, there was also a debate between European Commission, Polish opposition and Polish government on practice of pushbacks. So there is this practice when Polish government, it was practicing also, as I mentioned at the beginning, in Morocco, correct me if I'm wrong, also in Greece. So when illegal immigrants were caught by custom officers, they were pushed back to the country from where they came. So what do we know about EU Polish cooperation in terms of migration crisis and the government approach to this crisis? Well, it's quite fresh. Probably you heard something. Belarus, let's try to imagine a map of Europe. Belarus, Poland, Iraq. So it's not, I don't want to say physically, but probably it's physically impossible to get to Belarus Polish border from Iraq if you do not take plane. Yeah. So there were organized charters flights from to Belarus from very often from Dubai and Polish embassies gave visas to Iraqi citizens to come to Belarusian embassies gave visas to Iraqi citizens to come to Belarus in order to cross the border. But let me say no more, because probably you want to share your reflections, what you have heard about this crisis. Some observers call it artificial crisis. I'm curious if you agree with such definition. And what was the position of European Union? What was the position of Poland? What was the position of Greece? So let's talk a little bit, because I'm afraid I will bore. What is English? You will feel bored when I'm talking and talking. So I give you the floor, and let's try to recall this development of crisis on Polish-Belarus border. You are very welcome.
Anybody that wants to mention what is happening currently between Belarus and Poland?
Poland, EU, yeah, please.
About the term that we used before about the technical, I have to say, right, problem crisis, I say I would agree with that because, as you said, physically it is not possible to go from Iraq to Belarus without any organizing of this trip. About the Poland, of course, you know, the first step was to protect the borders, of course, as a country would do that in such a crisis. The EU is, I think it's okay. The main purpose of EU is to have a common goal on that thing, on pushing Lukashenko to not playing with the EU-Belarus relations that matter. From before, even from the internal political crisis, Belarus, the EU-Belarus relations are a little bit
let me stop you here and you will continue in a moment because this is very important what you just said. Exactly, the nature of Belarus-EU relations were the worst in history because what happened in Belarus last year? There was election which was not recognized by democratic world. Alexander Lukashenko self-appointed himself president. The president who got majority of votes had to flee the country and escape the imprisonment, and she's now in Europe. So more, according to yesterday's statistics, because I have also my former students who are now who are from Belarus and they work as journalists in Poland, but showing the situation in Belarus. So yesterday, another political prisoner appeared in Belarus because there was a mother of an activist protester who escaped to Poland, and his mother was arrested. So now in Belarus there are 900. Just can you imagine 907 political prisoners? It's 21st century, and we are talking about a country dictatorship that is 3-hour drive from Warsaw. You know, from Thessaloniki is very far, but from Warsaw, if you drive a car, you could get to Belarus in 3-4 hours. And this is really, really impressive what is happening there. So, reaction of the European Union was sanctions against Belarusian regime, was not recognition of this regime. And this is very important to know. Now we have, but again, what Lukashenko said, okay, you do not recognize me, but in one of his interviews after these events, but imagine what will happen if I stop protecting you from immigrants. He said it a year ago, yeah? So if I stop protecting your border from immigrants. So he sent this signal, nobody paid attention to that back then. And now happened what happened. Sorry, I interrupted, so please.
No, and this is another expression of why it is just a technical and organized crisis, because we see, at least here in Greece, the same thing with Turkey about trying to exploit the whole migrant and refugee crisis. So that the phrase that Lukashenko said is almost the same as it happens here. So it's like a copy, but not in Europe.
Lukashenko does even more because he looks at a deal between Erdogan and the European Union, and he says, actually, it was Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, who said that, look at the deal between Erdogan and the European Union, maybe you should offer the same deal to Lukashenko, which is absolute nonsense, right? And that also shows the development and the planning of this situation. So what happened and what steps were taken by Polish government? Well, there was a practice of pushbacks. There was decision that is quite controversial because there was emergency state, and according to the rules of emergency state, 3 kilometers away from the border, from Polish-Belarus border, no journalist was allowed. So, my good ladies and gentlemen, you could understand the critics of such decision, because if no journalist is allowed to actual border for, well, I believe for a few months, so nobody knows what is really happening there. And now it changed only last week ago, when there was a change in policy, a change in regulation, that journalists are allowed, but only with supervision of guards. So that's some change at least. And Poland was cooperating with European Union. But what did European Union do? Absolutely with one voice, it said that Polish border is European Union border, Poland protects the European Union, and Angela Merkel called Lukashenko twice. After that, which was also a quite controversial decision, for example, for opposition in Belarus, the elected president Tikhanovskaya said that it was unnecessary move. But as a result, a couple of developments and a couple of changes happened, because Lukashenko took the refugees from the border to shelter next to the border. But it's very close, the shelters are very close, it's like a few minutes drive from the border. But at least these people are not in the forest, on open air. More, when I checked the messages of official Bell Avia, this is flight operator Belarus, it had a message in English language to passengers flying from Dubai that people with Iraqi citizenship will not be allowed on board. So please do not buy tickets. So that was also a change in terms of Belarus approach. But it showed something different. It showed that the crisis came from this from place where nobody expected. If you ask anybody, if you ask yourself last year whether we could expect migration crisis from Belarus, nobody would predict that. So it shows something very important. It showed that European Union needs to be not only reactive in that kind of situation, but proactive actor on global scale. And what is more, European Union must speak with one voice when it comes to such important issues as migration and asylum policy. Example of Polish-EU relations shows that it's not always easy to speak with one voice. But I want to finish on positive note, and I want to say that maybe it's in European Union, it's time for transformational leaders who will do their best in order to find common ground for EU to speak with one voice. And I'm sure you, as the future decision makers, could help in that. I'm open to, let me finish there, and let us use the opportunity that we meet. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Yeah, anything about my short talk about Poland, about government in Poland, feel free. And we could also discuss Polish-EU bilateral relations in perspectives. And topics are not funny, but still it's smile. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vadym. It was very interesting. So we have the opportunity to ask whatever we want to know about Poland and any other aspect of politics in this country.
For example, because of this dynamics and because of these relations, I was asked when I was at the University of Granada 2 weeks ago, I was asked about freedom of scientific freedom in Poland. So it was quite sad to hear this question, and I answered, and I may answer also today, that absolutely, Poland is a democratic country, and as a scholar, I do have absolute freedom in writing what I want, in studying what I want. Well, I do see worrying illiberal tendencies, that is true, but I do not, when it comes to academic freedom, University of Warsaw is a place where such freedom exists, so that's for sure. Yeah. That means I could talk in front of you openly, yeah. So no.
I had that question run over my head all this time.
Yeah.
So, for example, recently I had an input from Turkish colleagues teaching political science, and they were very worried and very sad to say that they could not be free in their research. Yep. They were not allowed to search or research the fields that they wanted, and that was very good.
And well, this is an example, yes, of where illiberal tendencies may lead, and that's why it's very important not to let illiberal tendencies go that far. That's why when we talk about illiberal democracy, we are talking about three potential scenarios. So when a liberal democracy, it's like muddling through, remains a liberal democracy for longer, when it changes to liberal democracy because of change of political accents and political players, or when it moves toward authoritarian regime, which is the black scenario. Yes, that's how it is. I do hope in the European Union it will be vice versa, going to liberal democracy.
Questions or any remarks you want to add?
Yeah, it's kind of question based on what you presented here, the personal as you speak for. What's the main thought in the Polish people when speaking about, for example, some regulations that come from the EU and some, let's say, profits that the people have? Why I ask that? Because many times we see that we take some money as countries of the European Union to do some things. So when these regulations are not being fully applied in reality, what do people, the Polish people, think about that? They think that they are being manipulated from the EU, or they think that they are taking advantages but not giving back the regulations.
That's a very good question. And according to Eurostat poll taken, according to statistics, I think that the second option, that people are very optimistically toward the European Union, and people say that, well, if we benefited so much from EU funds, we should also be a loyal member of the European Union, and that's why more than 80% are pro-European in Poland, and that also shows and that also shapes the government policy, because anyone who come up on political scene in any member state with 80% support for European Union and say, hey, let's exit, it will be political suicide. So, but again, we could see some sort of paradoxes, because ruling party argues that European integration should be mainly about economic integration, not political integration. So they say we are not in favor of leaving the EU, but we are in favor of economic integration without political integration. So, you know, since time immemorial, there was two concepts, supranationalism and intergovernmentalism. Yes, Charles de Gaulle, I believe, came up with the idea of Europe of nations. Jean Monnet was the representative of neo-functional approach of creating federal union. So the same debate takes place now, but paradoxically, no matter which position opposition in Poland and ruling party have, they both agree that two-speed Europe is not good for Poland, because this idea of differentiated integration. Those who want more have more, and so neither party in Poland agrees with such scenario for Poland. At the same time, you ask about public opinion about European Union in Poland. So very often it is associated with EU funds and positive approach to European Union, and very often it is associated with EU funds and also freedom of movement. So ability to work, because that's what, especially, that's absolutely different in case of Greece, because you don't remember what it means to not be in the EU. Polish citizens, a lot of Polish citizens remember perfectly what it means to be not in the EU, what it means to spend time on border control, and so on and so forth. Yes, so this also has important factor on public attitude. Yeah, probably.
So if I can make an extra question.
Yes, sure. I mean, if you have time, because
Small question. We have with us Professor Andreu. It is all his field of expertise, what we are talking all the time. He has some remarks.
I want to say his expert. I'm still learning, so this is why I have not spoken so far. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. Just two remarks. First, it's very interesting to compare Greece and Poland when it comes to Europe, and it's very interesting how many differences occur. For example, I think that this difference applies to the whole European South when compare attitudes to Europe, because the dominant approach in the South, at least during the last decade, is that the University is not solidarity towards its members, and more EU intervention and more EU funding and support is needed. Which does not apply to Poland.
Absolutely.
Economically, Poland is a success story. Yeah, both Greece and Poland have benefited from EU funds, but Poland is a success story. Greece appears as a failure, at least during the last year. And the second observation is to that despite that, we're having something like a liberal democracy in Poland. And I'm saying this because studies about populism usually associate populism with economic stagnation, marginalization of people who feel neglected by the political system, feel losing out and seek support from powers that are undemocratic, illiberal, but this is not the case in Poland. Poland economically is one of the most successful member states of the Union. It has actually converged economically to the average. So
it breaks patterns, yes. So, but at the same, you're absolutely right, Professor. But at the same time, maybe timing now is very demanding, because we are witnessing post-COVID situation, and inflation rates in Poland now jumped, and prices went up as never before. So, we all look with a certain level of consciousness and worriness what will happen in the upcoming years, because even European Commission prognosis for next year is bigger inflation, and only in 2023 the inflation should be again normal. So that's COVID impact, I believe, also. But maybe I'm not economist, but I may just assume that maybe also these steps that could be considered as populist, as 500 plus what I mentioned, to give to social support.
Yeah, my point was, usually the assumption is that your skepticism and also populism is by losers, economic integration losers, the ones who lose from progress, from economic digitalization. But the opposite has happened in Poland. Despite that, or because of that, the ruling party has become very, very popular. So the conflict between economics and politics and populism is too complex, I think. More complex than it's thought that we should think about that. Another point that we can talk about understand what's happening in Poland and reach out, take into account the management with duration of political languages, the political system and its own particularities. For example, we have not spoken of any influential left-wing part of Poland.
Right.
That is important to know that the very particular
It's
history is important, societal relations are important.
Yeah. So that's absolutely true, because domestic competition is of key importance, which what is the mainstream movement, right? But again, in Poland, we have witnessed two main forces. But as I mentioned, every election we have so-called anti-systemic force that gets approximately 10%, and for a few years now there is a solid up to 10% support for ultra-right movement like called the Confederation, that is very anti-European Union. Yes, so it is, but it is there is a question whether it will remain its popularity or not in the future, or it's only one-term party. Yeah. Thank you.
The second step of your question?
Yeah,
Small question.
if it is internally communicated from the government side, as a link, for example, this with the justice system, as a link from the strategy of the Polish government all the years towards EU, or as a basic strategy of confronting with the EU legislation, etc.
So you mean if these changes were done on purpose to have?
Yeah, or is it communicated as a link to the people internally?
Well, it is communicated by ruling party as a necessity, first of all. And again, because of domestic specifics, it is argumentated and justified that these changes are needed because in order to eliminate post-communists from legal system. So there is a strong message that judicial system and judges in Poland are like casta, so sort of mafia, and full of communists, post-communist officials. And the idea of reform is to have lustration, yes, to eliminate these people from judicial power. So that's how it is sold to people. But in fact, we have some paradox, because one of the judges appointed of new judges was a communist prosecutor in times of communism, and now he's a judge. Yes, so it's just some paradoxes are there. Thank you very much for your questions. And thank you for opportunity to be here. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you that you came and you gave this lecture
My
today.
pleasure. My pleasure.